Many people, when they convert to Islam, obviously, and this is natural, many new Muslims, they are far from that level when they become Muslim. But as I said, this is natural. Inshallah, we all of us, inshallah, hopefully, are still growing in Islam. Even Muslims who have been Muslim for many, many years, inshallah, they're still growing in Islam. They are still improving their Islam. They are still improving their Iman. They are still increasing their Iman. The point is that when we talk about belief and having the real and proper belief, or what is known as Iman, we are not talking about some kind of abstract recognition or theoretical recognition of what is true. This goes much beyond that. Many people can recognize that God exists and the Creator exists, and they know that and they recognize that fact. But this is not Iman. This is not Iman. Iman, it only becomes Iman when that recognition of that fact enters into the person's heart and begins to dominate that person's heart. And he puts that recognition of that fact above anything else. And this, of course, as we said, leads to having the love for Allah, having fear of Allah, having hope in Allah, having awe for Allah, and so forth. And that is why the scholars throughout the history, they said that Iman has certain components. And I think this is something very important for new Muslims to recognize. And especially because you'll hear sometimes a lot of people maybe making claims about themselves and about Islam and so forth. They say that the components of Iman include belief in the heart. In other words, that recognition that the thing is true, you know that it is true. Profession by the tongue, as we said, making the Shahada, making a proclamation of the Shahada, and acting upon that belief in one's deeds. It must infiltrate, it must go from what is in the heart to actually influence the individual, and he behaves according to that belief. Many times you'll meet people and they will say, oh, I don't pray and I don't fast and I don't do this and I don't do that and this is, but I have belief in my heart. I have Iman in my heart. Again, from an Islamic perspective, this is not true. There is something wrong. There is something wrong if that is really in the person's heart and it's not driving the person. It's not really influencing the person and leading that person to do the good deeds, especially the obligatory and the most important obligatory deeds that the individual is supposed to perform. How is this person really claiming that he has or she has Iman in their hearts? If it is really there, you'll see the effect on the individual. And so the person can analyze himself, and he can look at himself and see what kind of deeds does he perform. And he can understand from that what kind of health is his Iman in. What kind of state of being is his Iman in. Is it strong? Is it weak? Is it diseased? Because this will be reflected actually in your actions. And inshallah, as I said, as you grow in Iman, also your deeds will improve as you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through your increase in Iman. There's even another level that the Prophet ﷺ referred to in a hadith, and that is the level of ihsan, where you've gone even beyond the state of Iman to a state where you are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you are seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right in front of you. And although you do not see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right in front of you, you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing you. This is yet another level of consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can imagine that the individual who is walking, who is living as if he sees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right in front of him, this person is going to behave much differently from the Muslim who says he believes in Allah but doesn't even think about Allah and doesn't care whether he is obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not. So the goal, inshallah, the goal is to continually increase our Iman and continually improve our Islam, our submission to Allah. So that's an important point to always keep in mind when you're performing any of these pillars of Islam and any of these ritual acts. So we've already discussed the Shahada. Obviously, that is the action that we take upon entering into Islam. And we'll discuss, therefore, the ritual acts, starting with establishing of the prayers. It is interesting to note when you read the Quran and when you read the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the continual command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with respect to the prayers is not simply the command just to pray. Allah does not tell us just pray. Every Muslim must pray. And in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ did not say that prayer is one of the pillars of Islam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to establish the prayers. What is known in Arabic as iqamat al-salat. Iqamah, to establish the prayers. Okay, so there must be some distinction between just praying and establishing the salat. Establishing the salat means to perform it properly and completely according to the manner in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us in the Quran and the Sunnah. And this distinction in the wording means that there could be many people who pray. You could find people who are praying, but they are not really establishing the salat. They are not really fulfilling the salat. It is similar to what has been quoted from Umar al-Khattab, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, about the pilgrimage to Mecca. He said, the number who performed the Hajj are few, while the riders, the number of people who are there riding on their animals and going around and being present at the Hajj are many. Those who perform the Hajj are few, while those who are actually there doing all the rituals and everything, there are many. So he's talking about the fact that actually those who are performing this Hajj in the proper manner and really doing it properly with the correct intention and everything, and inshallah therefore getting the proper results from it, those are actually few in number, even though there might be a large mass of people performing the Hajj. Similarly, you might find a large number of people who are praying, but those who are really establishing the salat and performing the salat in the proper manner, with all of its conditions and with all of its guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ, those might be very few indeed. And as we said, the salat is both. The salat, like all the other rituals, it has external aspects as well as internal aspects. The internal aspect of khushu', for example, of feeling of submissiveness and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the salat, in the prayer. These have to be there. These are components of the prayer. Okay, the prayer is not just the actual physical action of bowing and prostrating and so forth, but also what is in your heart. And if you really want to fulfill the prayer properly, then your mind and your heart have to be conscious of what you are doing, and you must have this feeling towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of submission, of humbleness and calmness and so forth throughout the prayer. And I emphasize this fact because since the prayer is done 5 times a day, and besides the obligatory prayer, there's also lots of sunnah prayers, it is easy for it to turn into some kind of just a mere ritual without much meaning to it. Some kind of custom. As I said earlier, this is what we do. We Muslims, we go and pray, we bow, we bow, we prostrate and so forth. We must be very careful never to allow our prayers to get to that point. And if we find our prayers getting to that point, then we have to realize there is something wrong. That this is not what the prayer is all about. And if the prayer is getting to that point, then we should not be surprised if the prayer actually has no effect on us whatsoever. We can pray, and as soon as we leave the prayer, we're back doing whatever it is we were doing before, whether it is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or whatever. When we approach the prayer, we should approach it with the intention, again, of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trying to get as much from the prayer as we can. This may take